I want to invite Donovan Campbell to come up and join us now. Everybody say hi. Going to be talking to us about being a faithful presence wherever you are. And Donovan is both double majoring and double minoring. I only think there's 5 or 6 disciplines at this university that he is not engaged in right now. So clearly he's the guy you want to listen to. So everybody listen up to Donovan.
So happy that you guys are all here tonight. I'm really excited to speak to you guys about what having a faithful presence really means. And so I'm going to just dive right in. So when did you guys last take time to just sit down and listen to someone? Well, we're pretty much all Virginia Tech students here, so it's likely that you've done that recently because, well, we're Hokies, so we care about one another, right? So let me issue a little bit bigger of a challenge. When was the last time you guys interacted with someone else and it cost you something in the process? See, being present with others, being faithfully present will cost us something. And that cost could be time, something that we really don't have a lot of as students. It could be money, something that we really don't have any of. But even more drastically, it could cost us in terms of self. It could be putting aside our own agenda, the things that we want to do to come alongside someone else, to encourage someone else. And as students with things to do, we've got places to go, we've got jobs to work and degrees to earn. It's so easy to become fixated on our own agenda and the things that we want to do. And at the same time, we've got this 24/7 constant bombardment of the media in our face. And we see all of the difficulties and, quite honestly, the atrocities that are happening not only in the US, but abroad. And we're called, as this next generation, to do something about it, to make a difference, to bring about change in the world, essentially to dream big. And so I'm not saying that I don't want us to dream big. We should dream big because our God is big, and He is capable of all things. But at the same time, we have these two extremes. We have focusing solely on self, and we have focusing only on sweeping change. And I believe that we can't just be on one side of the spectrum, because that prevents us from having a faithful presence. It prevents us from being the instruments of healing that God intended us to be. See, perhaps real, lasting change occurs not on one side or the other, but somewhere in the middle, as everyday people just like you and me, in our everyday lives, take small steps of faith to genuinely love and care for one another. And so what does this small step of faith look like? Well, it's really composed of 3 things in particular, and that is being aware, it is engaging with others, and it is acting for the benefit of others. And I'm confident that if we do these 3 things, we will have a faithful presence on this campus, and God will use that to heal our divided nation. So, being aware, what does that really mean? So to be aware is to understand that other people's stories, their experiences, their feelings are unique to them. We are not the same. It's as simple as that. We are not the same. But that's not to say that that's a bad thing. We should be interacting with each other because of that. But we have this natural tendency, this innate inclination to cling to what is comfortable and to never branch out of our comfort zone. And so the only way that we can really combat this tendency is to understand one thing in particular, and that is God's story. His ultimate narrative, which does in fact involve every single one of us in this room, and every single person that you pass by on the drill field as you go to class. All of us have been created by God and given culture as a means of expression, and ultimately as a means to glorify Him. It's incredible, right? See, we have students from 41 different states here and 36 different countries. That's so many different walks of life consolidated just to Blacksburg. And yet, we hang out in the same clusters of people, having the same conversations and doing the same things. Because quite honestly, we do not care enough about God's story. We do not. Because if we were truly aware, if we truly understood Christ's love and the gift that we have been given and what He has done for us, would we not, in every instance, want to share that with others who do not have it? I believe that we would. See, we have this dream, this goal of healing our divided nation, and it all starts with being aware. And so being aware leads us directly to the relational aspect of having a faithful presence, and that is through engaging with others. And so let's clarify here, because engaging is not simple, it's not easy, it's not this quick thing. Engaging is not asking someone to go get lunch with you and then just talking about how much you hate your 8 a.m.s or how tired you all are all the time. I know that's, honestly, a lot of times that's the majority of our conversation. The first thing I say to people when they're asking how they're doing is, oh, I'm tired. And a lot of you guys are the same. See, no, engaging with others is looking someone in the eye and asking them, what is your story? What is meaningful to you? What makes you tick? And it's not offering judgment on how to fix them. It's not offering advice on, oh, well, you have this problem, so here's how we fix that loneliness. A few weeks ago, I had an opportunity of my own to share my life story in front of a large group of people. And really, I was just sharing how God had been working in my life in the past few years. And so much of my own life is that I feel misunderstood. A lot of that stemming from the fact that although I am a U.S. citizen, I grew up my entire life overseas in East Asia. And so, really, I was nervous to share in front of this large group because so often in the past, people had just wanted to fix my feelings of loneliness, of being misunderstood. And when I first got to Virginia Tech, I felt very much at odds with this culture that was supposed to be my own. It didn't really feel like home. But after I shared, one of my good friends just ran over to me and he just embraced me. And quite honestly, just started sobbing all over me. And as a result, I started crying all over him. And what was more incredible than two pretty much grown men at this point sobbing over me was that, and he's sitting in the back of me, was that we grew up on complete opposite sides of the world, in completely different cultures, with no context for each other's lives. And we'd only met each other about a year before. But see, none of those things mattered, because what my friend did is he truly engaged with me. He chose to care for me. He chose to love me. He didn't have to say any words. He didn't have to just fix those feelings. He was present, and that was sufficient. This is what it means to engage with others. This is how we care for one another. And this is how we ultimately go further on that path towards healing. And so finally, that leads us to action. Because so often we're aware of others and then we engage with someone, but then we just let them fall through the cracks. We get this checklist mentality of, oh, I met with that person this week, check them off my list. But see, if we're doing that, then are we really even doing it for others, or are we just doing it for ourselves, to make us feel good about what we've done to care for others? Guys, this is so much a part of the problem. We have to continue to act once we've engaged with others. And this can be done in any way that you feel is necessary. It can be inviting them to go get lunch again. It can be making lunch with them, going to a football game with them, or even something as simple as driving them to go get groceries because they don't have a car. Guys, ultimately, we can't just be aware. Yes, those are parts of the process. We need to be aware. Then we need to engage with others. But then we need to use that knowledge that we have now gained to care for others and to serve them. And so I was thinking in my own life, okay, who has been an example of this to me, of being aware of others, engaging with others, and ultimately acting out of service and loving others? And I thought back, 30 years ago, my dad started his freshman year here at Virginia Tech. And from the time my dad was 9 years old, he knew that he wanted to be an electrical engineer. So yeah, my dad is a huge nerd. He's sitting right here in the front tonight. Please come talk to him after. But my dad, when he got to Virginia Tech, he got involved with an organization called Crew. And Crew challenged my dad, even though he felt more comfortable engaging with computer screens than with people, to see the world from God's viewpoint. And so he did. And that led him to care for others, to engage with others who had a different perspective, who had a different culture than his own. And he began to see those different viewpoints and the value of them. And ultimately, it led him to act, waking up at 6 a.m. for morning prayer, doing campus evangelism right here at Virginia Tech, or even inviting people to Crew. And after a few years of these steps of faith, my dad felt called to go to East Asia. And so he trusted God, and he went. And ultimately, that's where he would meet his wife. And that's where he would have me and my two brothers. But even more importantly than that, that's where he would serve God using his engineering degree that he got here at Virginia Tech, working with computers, working on digital strategies to share the gospel with thousands of people all around the world, across cultures, across boundaries. And it all started with having a faithful presence right here on this campus. And now 30 years later, I'm here getting to speak to all of you about what I think it means to have a faithful presence. And so I'm not saying that you're going to be called to overseas work. Some of you may be, but it's likely that most of you won't. But what I am wholeheartedly saying is that I believe through being aware and through engaging with others and through acting for the benefit of others, we are loving people in the way that Christ would want us to. This is how we have a faithful presence. And this is how God will use us to heal the wounds and break down the barriers between us, one faithful step at a time. Thank you.